Ever imagine walking through a plant, air thick with the scent of, well, fertilizer? But your job, you're making sure those giant mixing machines are churning out the right blend, the precise blend of chemicals. For optimal crop growth, we're diving into that today. The surprisingly complex world of a fertilizer mixer.
You make it sound, I don't know, a little more glamorous than I could. But yeah, no, it's not just about throwing powders together. This is where chemistry meets agriculture, big time. And the precision, it's pretty fascinating.
Okay, so walk me through this. What's a typical day look like? Someone in this role, what are they actually doing?
Okay, so picture this. You start your day, you're surrounded by these industrial-sized blenders. Before you even hit start, you're checking gauges, doing inspections, wear and tear. Everything needs to be tip-top.
Because one malfunctioning machine in this scenario, that could mean, what, a whole batch of fertilizer is off? What happens then?
Exactly. Precision, that's key here. You're working with a specific, let's say, NPK ratio. So that's your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium levels. Crucial for plant growth, right? One wrong calculation, you miss a step, the whole batch, it's compromised. Keen eye for detail and really understanding the machinery, that's essential, even from day one.
It's amazing the responsibility. The sources mentioned starting as an entry-level fertilizer mixer. What does that even entail?
Learning the ropes.
Yeah.
You're assisting the more senior staff, you're mastering all those safety protocols, because remember, we're dealing with chemicals here, potentially hazardous ones, and becoming familiar with the specific types of machinery.
So it's not just, learning how to operate the machine. You're learning the why behind every safety procedure, the science behind every ingredient.
Yeah. And as you progress, let's say you move up to junior fertilizer mixer, you're given more independence. You might be tasked with, like, calculating those NPK ratios we talked about, adjusting the settings on the machines based on specific crop needs. You might even be training new staff.
Sounds like real opportunity for growth, even within that role itself, before even moving up the corporate ladder. What else might a junior fertilizer mixer handle?
Well, let's say a batch is mixed. Their job's not done. Quality control's a big part of it. Taking samples, running tests. You got to make sure that final product meets the industry standards. It's about understanding that what they're mixing, it's impacting crop yield, and really even food supply down the line.
That's a lot of pressure on their shoulders. So attention to detail, solid work ethic, clearly vital. But what about those looking to climb that ladder? What's the trajectory look like for a fertilizer mixer?
That's where it gets interesting. Starting out requires those hands-on skills, that commitment to safety. But moving up, let's say, a senior fertilizer mixer, is more strategic then.
More strategic, how so?
Think less about the day-to-day mixing, more about overseeing the entire process. You're managing teams, maybe even collaborating with different departments to, optimize production, make sure the fertilizers are being formulated, blended efficiently.
And probably dealing with troubleshooting when those inevitable curveballs pop up.
For sure. And this is where those certifications we talked about earlier, they come in. They become even more valuable because they're demonstrating a commitment to that professional development, showcasing expertise, like, understanding chelated micronutrients. Those are, like, crucial for certain crops, soil conditions.
Right. It's not just about experience. It's about demonstrating you really understand the science behind it all and that dedication to staying ahead of the curve. Speaking of, how does a fertilizer mixer, especially at that higher level, how do they stay up to date in a field that's got to be constantly evolving? New technologies, new techniques, all that.
Oh yeah, fertilizer production, definitely not stagnant. To stay ahead, continuous learning, that's key. Attending workshops, latest advancements in granulation processes, or taking online courses, precision agriculture, its impact on fertilizer application, even just, staying informed. New environmental regulations, that commitment to expanding your knowledge, it's crucial for moving up.
It's like a whole other layer to this job, the constant need to adapt and learn. Speaking of which, we've been, diving into the ins and outs of being a fertilizer mixer, but you mentioned a platform, RoleCatcher, and how it can be a game changer for someone on this career path. What makes it stand out from the typical job hunting sites?
Oh, that's a great transition. Because RoleCatcher, it's not just about, finding open positions. It's like having a personal career coach right in your pocket, guiding you every step of the way, from making that perfect resume all the way to acing the interview.
Okay, unpack that for me. What does that support actually look like for someone who wants to be a fertilizer mixer?
Okay, so say you're trying to break into the field, right? RoleCatcher, what they do is they take your resume, your basic resume. They use AI to analyze it, compare it to what fertilizer mixer positions are looking for.
So it's like helping you tailor your experience to the specific language, what employers are actually looking for. That's huge in such a tough job market. But what about, okay, you get the interview, that's when the nerves really kick in for a lot of people.
I know, right? And RoleCatcher knows that too.
Mhm.
They've got this library of practice interview questions, not just, generic ones. These are geared toward industrial roles, some even specifically for, you guessed it, fertilizer mixers.
So they've really done their homework. They've analyzed what hired managers want, and then they give you the tools so you can practice, really refine those answers, go in confident.
Exactly. They've analyzed what hiring managers in this field are looking for. They give you the tools to practice, refine those answers, boost your confidence. It's great.
It's like getting a sneak peek into the interviewer's brain. They don't just throw questions at you, do they? What about feedback?
Okay, so that's the best part. They have this AI-powered system. It can analyze your responses, like how you're speaking, even your body language if you do video, and it gives you personalized feedback.
Wow.
It's really like having your own personal coach helping you perfect those interview skills.
I can see how that would be a game changer, especially for someone new to the field or just someone who hasn't interviewed in a while. Takes the guesswork out of it.
Totally.
But it doesn't stop there. RoleCatcher, they don't just leave you hanging once you get the job. They have resources for career development, keeping up with trends, even exploring different paths within the field.
So it's not just about getting your foot in the door. It's about that whole journey. Now, you mentioned the senior fertilizer mixer role, but our sources at RoleCatcher, they indicated that's not necessarily the ceiling.
Oh, not at all. Think about it. You've worked your way up, you've mastered the technical stuff, honed your leadership skills, you're the perfect candidate for a supervisory role. Or even, management within the plant.
So you could go from overseeing a mixing station to overseeing the entire production process. What kind of responsibilities are we talking about at that level?
We're talking big picture stuff now, setting production schedules, managing budgets, making sure all those safety and quality control standards, they're being met across the board. You might even be collaborating with engineers on new equipment or, process improvements. So it becomes less about like that hands-on mixing and much more about the decision making that impacts the entire operation.
Exactly. And again, this is where those certifications, those deep dives into, precision agriculture, sustainable fertilizer production,
Yeah.
they become super valuable.
It's about demonstrating that you're not just a manager, you're a real expert, constantly innovating.
Pushing the boundaries.
Yeah. And, while the managerial path is one way to go, let's not forget about those people who are really passionate about the science behind it all. They might find themselves drawn to roles in, like, research and development, maybe working on completely new types of fertilizers, or exploring more, I don't know, environmentally friendly ingredients.
Oh, that's right. It's not a one-size-fits-all career path.
Yeah.
There are so many opportunities to really specialize, hone in on a specific niche within the fertilizer world.
Exactly. And that's what I think is so exciting about this. It's constantly evolving, new challenges and opportunities always popping up. Speaking of exciting, we've talked a lot about the technical aspects, the career progression, but what about the day-to-day? What's it really like to be a fertilizer mixer? I mean, really?
Well, I'm not going to lie, it's not for everyone. The work environment, it's a bit more, how do I say, industrial than, your typical office job.
Yeah, I bet those giant machines get pretty loud. Plus, there's that, that distinct aroma working with fertilizer. Our sources alluded to that earlier.
Yeah, it's a sensory experience for sure. Be prepared to be on your feet, moving around. You might even be lifting heavy bags of stuff. It's physical.
But I imagine there's also something really satisfying about working with your hands, seeing the results of your work right in front of you.
Absolutely. And
Wow.
knowing that what you're doing, it's playing a vital role in agriculture, helping to feed people. It's rewarding.
Okay, so we've established it's physical, maybe comes with a unique smell, but what about the people? What's the team environment like at a fertilizer plant?
You know, in my experience, and this seems to line up with what we're seeing from RoleCatcher, it's often a close-knit community. You're working side by side with people who really get it. The challenges, the rewards, everything.
There's that camaraderie that comes with an environment like that, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. You rely on each other. Safety's a big thing. You celebrate your successes. And then when challenges come up, you come together.
It's a good reminder that even in this age of, automation and AI, the human element, it's still so important.
100%. Now, we've highlighted the good stuff, but let's be real for a second. There are some potential downsides.
Oh, right. Let's not sugarcoat it. What are some things that potential fertilizer mixers they should really be aware of before jumping in?
Well, as we said, it can be demanding
Yep.
physically, and sometimes, yeah, it can be repetitive. You're working with heavy machinery. You've got those potentially hazardous chemicals. So safety, always top of mind.
Right. It's not a job for someone afraid of a little hard work or someone who, doesn't want to get their hands dirty.
Exactly. And because it's tied to agriculture, there can be those busy seasons. Overtime might be needed. You might have some early mornings. It's just something to be prepared for.
Good point. That flexibility is key.
Yeah. Now, all that being said, the demand for skilled fertilizer mixers, it's expected to remain strong in the coming years.
Why is that? What's driving that demand?
Well, the world population is still growing, right?
Yeah.
So we need to produce more food, and fertilizer is a key part of that, boosting those crop yields.
Basic supply and demand. More mouths to feed. Bigger need for the people who help produce that food.
Exactly. Plus, there's this growing awareness of sustainable agriculture, and that includes, like, how to optimize fertilizer use. How do we minimize the impact on the environment?
So it's not just about producing more, but producing it better, more responsibly.
Right, and that's where all those advancements in precision agriculture, sensors, data analysis, all that, that's going to play a big role going forward.
It's not enough to just mix the fertilizer. You need to understand the why, the environmental factors, the technology driving innovation. It's a lot.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so interesting. It's not just a set of instructions anymore.
Hmm.
You're using your knowledge, skills, even your passion to really make a difference.
I love that. It's not just a job, it's a calling.
Exactly. And, speaking of making a difference, we touched on the future of fertilizer production earlier. I think it's worth exploring that a bit more.
Let's do it. What are some of those trends, the technologies that are on the horizon, and how are those going to shape the role of a fertilizer mixer in the years to come?
Well, one of the most exciting things is biofertilizers. Remember we talked about those earlier?
Yeah, fertilizers made from natural sources, not synthetic chemicals.
Right, microbes, plant extracts, even compost. It's about nourishing the soil naturally, and that's promising for the environment and for agriculture in general.
Sounds incredibly promising, both for the environment, the sustainability of agriculture as a whole.
It really is. And this shift, this move toward biofertilizers, it's going to require fertilizer mixers to, learn new things, understand not just the chemical stuff, but the biological stuff too, how it all interacts, the soil, the plants, everything.
A whole other level of complexity, but exciting, right? So much opportunity.
I think so. And while we're on the topic of innovation, another trend we're seeing, it's nanotechnology in fertilizer production.
Nanotechnology. Okay, that's fascinating. I've heard of that in other areas, but how does that work with fertilizer?
So basically, it's like using these tiny, tiny particles, we're talking nanoscale, and they deliver nutrients to the plants in a much more efficient way.
Wow.
Imagine fertilizers that can be absorbed right through the leaves, the roots. It minimizes waste, reduces that environmental impact we were talking about.
Okay, that sounds incredibly futuristic, but also incredibly important, especially now. Climate change, we need to do more with less. It's amazing.
Exactly, and these are just a couple of the advancements that are coming. We're also seeing slow-release fertilizers, so they deliver nutrients gradually, which is huge for reducing runoff, and then fertilizers tailored to very specific plant species.
So it's all about that precision and that sustainability, finding ways to optimize use, shrinking that environmental footprint as much as possible.
Yes, and as these technologies keep evolving, so will the role of the fertilizer mixer. They're going to adapt, specialize even more.
What does all this mean for someone who's thinking about this as a career then? What are the skills and knowledge that are going to be like the most valuable going forward?
Well, a good foundation in science, chemistry, biology, those are always going to be key. But beyond that, you have to be willing to embrace new technology, have a real passion for innovation, and that commitment to continuous learning. We've said it a few times, but that's going to be crucial for success.
It's not just about mixing anymore, it's much bigger than that. It's understanding the science, the technology, the environment, coming up with solutions.
You got it. And let's not forget the soft skills. Communication, teamwork, problem solving, those are always valuable, no matter what you do.
It's that mix of technical expertise, adaptability, and being able to work well with others. That's what's going to make someone stand out.
Absolutely. Speaking of standing out, we should probably get back to RoleCatcher. How do they fit in with all this? Especially with all these advancements we're talking about.
That's a great point. We've talked about how RoleCatcher can help with resumes, interviews, development, but how do they handle these new trends and technologies?
Okay, so what I find really impressive about RoleCatcher is that they're all about staying ahead of the curve. They're always updating the platform. New resources, insights, they even have connections to employers who are already embracing these new advancements.
So it's not a stagnant tool. It evolves as the industries they work with evolve, which is really what you need in this day and age.
Exactly. And for someone who's interested in the future of fertilizer production, that's huge. They can connect with those innovative companies, learn about the latest and greatest, and set themselves up for success.
It's like having a direct line to the cutting edge.
Exactly. Honestly, I think that's crucial for anyone these days, no matter what they do. Things are changing so fast, those who adapt, stay curious, they're the ones who will thrive.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Day to day of being a fertilizer mixer, the advancements that are blowing my mind, all of it. Before we wrap up, any final thoughts? We're back, ready to explore those unexpected ways, how the fertilizer mixer role connects to some of these big challenges, the ones facing our planet.
It's easy to think, oh, fertilizer is just one step in food production. But the truth is, it's really woven into these massive issues. Climate change, we've got resource depletion, even things like geopolitical stability.
Okay, so break that down for me. Let's start with climate change. How does making fertilizer, how does that factor into that whole thing?
Well, you've got to look at how it's made the traditional way. It's energy intensive, to say the least. Often relies on fossil fuels, which, not great for those greenhouse gas emissions. Plus, certain fertilizers, if they're not managed correctly, they can release nitrous oxide right into the atmosphere. And that's a greenhouse gas, even more potent than carbon dioxide.
So it's not just what's in it, it's the whole process of making it, using it. What about those other challenges you mentioned, the resource depletion, the geopolitical side of things?
Right. Okay, so think about phosphorus. It's in pretty much every fertilizer out there, but it's finite. We're not making more of it. And how we mine it right now, not sustainable at all. We got to figure out ways to recycle it and how to not depend so much on these, limited reserves.
That's a huge hurdle for this industry to overcome. What's being done?
So that's where those innovations we talked about, that's where they come in. Scientists, companies, they're exploring things like, can we recover phosphorus from wastewater? Can we get this, extract it from livestock manure?
So it's closing that loop, creating a circular economy, waste becomes a resource. That's amazing.
That's it. And this is where a fertilizer mixer, someone who's really invested in learning, they can make a huge difference. They're the ones on the ground, putting these practices in place, optimizing everything, making sure we're using these precious resources responsibly.
It's really incredible when you think about it. Someone who might spend their day surrounded by, these giant machines, bags of chemicals, they're part of the solution for these global issues. It's pretty amazing.
It really is all about perspective. But you're right, the decisions they make, what they know, it has an impact way beyond the factory.
And that takes us back to something you've emphasized this entire time. Continuous learning, it's key. This field moves so fast. What resources would you recommend for someone who really wants to stay on top of everything?
Well, you've got platforms like RoleCatcher for the industry-specific stuff, those connections. But there are some great organizations doing some serious and cool research. Sustainable fertilizer, that's their thing.
Yeah.
The International Fertilizer Association, for example. They're a wealth of information if you want to know the best practices, the new trends, all that.
Those are some great insights. Any final thoughts for our listeners today? Anyone out there who's thinking, hey, maybe a fertilizer mixer, that's for me, especially with all this new stuff on the horizon?
I'd say if you love science, if technology gets you fired up, and you're passionate about sustainability, this field, it's got it all. Dive in, don't be afraid of the challenges, and keep learning, always. The impact you can have, it's bigger than you think.
That is a great point to end on. So to anyone listening who thought fertilizer was just, well, fertilizer, I hope this deep dive has opened your eyes. It's complex, it's crucial, and these are the people helping feed the planet.
And if you're out there thinking about this career path, remember, you're not just mixing ingredients. You're part of something bigger, shaping the future of agriculture, building a more sustainable world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's a wrap on this deep dive, everyone. Thanks for joining us as we explored the world of the fertilizer mixer. Catch you next time for another fascinating look at a unique and essential profession.